Welcome back to A Little Bit of Cheese, your daily bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm your host, Cody Depios. I want to thank you for being here with us once again today. It is October 17th, 2024, Thursday. Not a whole lot going on in terms of news, but we got a couple of talking points today for the episode. And starting at the top here with number one, the Packers are about to debut their whiteout uniforms on Sunday, taking on the Houston Texans. It's kind of funny because it's the winter warning uniforms that the Packers are using for their marketing. I think it's very cool that they went out and made up some new uniforms that the team can wear. I'm just finding it very ironic now that their winter warning whiteout uniforms are going to be played at a Sunday noon game at Lambeau Field where it will be sunny with a high of 73 degrees. It's just kind of where it is, and this brings me to my next point here, where I think these uniforms, of course, they're essentially all white. They have the green lettering, and then there's the green outline for the G on the helmet, and then green stripes over the top of the helmet, like there typically is on a Green Bay Packer helmet. But I think these would look a lot cooler if they were used during a night game, and for some reason, the NFL scheduling has the Jets at Steelers as the Sunday night football game, while you have the Packers and Texans, two Super Bowl contenders in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people's opinions. That game is going to be going on at noon instead, and also another noon game is Lions at Vikings, two of the best teams in the NFC, a good divisional matchup there between two rivals. But between those two games, and you see Jets at Steelers as a Sunday night game, and the reason is because ahead of the season they have these games scheduled. They don't start flexing until later in the season. I think they should allow for flexing games, which, for those that don't know, flexing would be to be able to switch up the schedule. So if the Packers was a better game than what was going on for Sunday night football, of course you want your better games to be played in the later slate. Then you can essentially flip those games, which it kind of just stinks because you have two really, really good football games, which I don't know why the Packers and Texans was not expected to be a really good matchup. Those are two teams that lit it up last year. They had good, young, elite quarterbacks in Jordan Love and C.J. Stroud, and for some reason, the NFL thought that a noon game would be sufficient for two of the top teams in the NFL to play, which I just think it's silly. And it's ironic, and I don't know why this is the debut for Green Bay's whiteout uniforms. I don't know why you wouldn't wait until like a little bit maybe closer to winter for the winter warning uniforms, but I don't know. There's a reason I'm sitting here and those people are making actual decisions. But it's just going to be funny to see a whiteout uniform at Lambeau where it'll be sunny with a high of 73, and it should be a really, really good football game. We'll dig into the nuts and bolts of that tomorrow as we will preview for both the Badgers and the Packers, but we'll do a little bit of the prep work here for the Badgers now, as I do want to talk about this game. It's very interesting. Of course, Wisconsin coming off a huge blowout win over Rutgers last week. They're going to be on the road again this week against a team that typically isn't that good, at least historically, but they historically somehow find a way to beat the Badgers, especially when it is there, and this team is Northwestern. Badgers at Northwestern will be 11 a.m. on Saturday, and that game will be at Northwestern, of course. And the one point, and I got a couple here leading up to the game that I want some of our listeners to be aware of, so they kind of have a little bit of a game plan. What are they watching for? What do the Badgers need to scheme for? What do they need to have in their minds before they go out and play this game on Saturday? And the first one here is that this game is not going to be played at the normal facilities for Northwestern. They are building a new facility. So right now they are playing the game at Northwestern's temporary lakefront stadium. So it's kind of like a makeshift field where they have some bleachers that are kind of propped up out by the lake. It doesn't look like a Division I college football stadium. I imagine it's going to be very windy, but it's going to be a completely new setting as to what people are used to for Northwestern football games, especially as Badger fans that have not been watching Northwestern this year, of course, up until Saturday. But it's going to be a new environment, and the players are going to need to be mentally prepared for that. A new environment as opposed to what you've been used to the past couple of years. And so that's going to be something to overcome. But then the two players that I want to gauge in here for the Wildcats of Northwestern is the quarterback, Jack Lausch. He's started 4 games. They've went 2-2 in those games, and he played solid in 2 of them. And the other 2, not so much. But the big thing that you want to key in here for Lausch is he is an RPO quarterback, which means run, pass, option. Means he's very good with the legs, and if you get him on the move, he can still throw it pretty well as well. So he's a young quarterback. He's inexperienced, but he's explosive, and an RPO quarterback, that can make for a big play where things can open up. Maybe there's wide open space right in front of him where he just takes off. Maybe you can't even gauge in on the running back, who is Cam Porter, who's another solid player. We'll talk about him in a minute. But you have the option to hand off, and then the quarterback could run on the outside, or he could pass it, which if you have a mobile quarterback out on the outside and you have someone step up to try to stop that quarterback, maybe there's space open for a receiver down the field. So it's an interesting offense. You see it used a lot in high school. Of course, there is a lot of it in the other levels, but it can be very effective, especially for undisciplined defenders who move out of the spaces that they're supposed to be if they see a play in development. That's how trick plays work, and I'm not going to call RPO a trick play because it is kind of by design, but it is one of those dynamic plays where the quarterback has a bunch of different options, and Jack Lausch is one of those guys that can run it pretty well. So that's the one thing that the Badgers are going to have to scheme for. And, of course, step 1 to stopping the RPO would be to stop the run. And Northwestern has running back Cam Porter this year so far, 59 carries, 272 yards, 5 touchdowns. Not exactly the numbers that you saw for the Rutgers running back leading up to last week and Kyle Monangai, but another solid running back. And when it comes to the run-pass option, that defense is going to have to stay disciplined. They're going to have to be able to stop both the run and the pass and the option of all 3 of the options that the quarterback has, to hand off, to run it himself, or to pass it down the field. So and I'll say historically, like I said, Northwestern, not a great college football program, but there's just this weird feeling that they always find a way to beat Wisconsin. And last year was one of those. I went to one of those games where Northwestern was actually one of the worst teams in all of college football. They marched into Camp Randall, and they beat the Badgers and pretty much demoralized them. That's really where all of my sour feelings towards the Wisconsin Badgers started, was at that game last year. Because I was actually there for 2 games last year, the one where they barely beat Rutgers, and that Rutgers team was not good last year, and then shortly after where they lost to Northwestern at home. And that was supposed to be a get-right game for the Badgers. They had not played great leading up to it. Went into it, you expect the Badgers to go in there and play well and win, but that just it wasn't the case. And Northwestern showed up when the Badgers didn't. And there have been a couple of cases that I can think of over my 15 years of watching Badger football that Northwestern shows up on days that the Badgers don't. So this is going to be one of those games. How does Luke Fickell have these guys prepared? Because they can't go into this game mentally coming off of 2 pretty big wins against Big Ten opponents. How can they get their mind right and have their expectations not set so high where they are undisciplined and not ready for a Northwestern team that has an opportunity and a possibility to beat them? So I am excited for this game. This is, and I know I started off very sour about the Badgers, especially after that Alabama game. I said they're going to have to do something that I did not expect for me to follow them and to care about them. Well, I think that point was last week against Rutgers. I did not expect for Wisconsin to even beat Rutgers last week. I was not very confident in that, but then they went in and they blew them out. They really stomped them in, and it was so much of an unexpected result for me that now I'm going to start to care about them a little bit more. And I expect this Badgers team to show up on Saturday. Of course, there's no promises. I'm still a little bit weary and uneasy about it, but it should be a good game, and I do expect the Badgers to come out and play well. And I hope that now that I say that, it doesn't go against me and it doesn't go back to bite the Badgers, but I'm just one of those weird superstitious fans where who knows what happens. But should be a good football game on Saturday. And for our last story here for a little bit of cheese today, have another quote from a Milwaukee Buck as we are preparing for the Bucks season opener. It will be on Wednesday. They will take on the Philadelphia 76ers. That is October 23rd. I believe a 6:30 p.m. tip-off there. It's two really good Eastern Conference teams going to be facing off in the first game of the NBA season. There's going to be a lot of bright lights for it. And the Bucks, of course, coming with a lot of expectations. They had some last year too, as it was their first year where they're going to have both Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard on the same starting five. Now, in this, I was reading some articles yesterday as well with the Milwaukee Bucks and the NBA, and I stumbled across this one that was, I believe, from Bleacher Report, and they were ranking what NBA stars have the greatest possibility of making it to the NBA Hall of Fame. And I think Giannis had 98.7%, and I believe Damian Lillard had 98.1%. So and we knew this ahead of time, but it kind of just goes to show how rare it is to have two Hall of Famers on your same starting five. That brings that caliber. That is a championship level roster there with just those two players. And last year they went in, they had all the expectations. Of course, they had a new head coach, and I think that might have created some problems, but a couple of the problems from last year and why that team wasn't able to reach the expectations that it had, it was kind of elucidated in an interview with Chris Middleton. Of course, Chris Middleton, he's probably seen as that third star on this Bucks team. He's been there for a long time. Actually, I think he was there either right before or right after Giannis got there. But one of the big reasons the Bucks have that championship ring back in 2021, and still a really solid player who's also dealt with injuries the last couple of years. But they interviewed him, and they kind of asked about why the Bucks team was not able to reach those expectations last year. And he said, quote, "I think last year we ran into problems with guys who are trying to run to the same spot because that's what they're used to and accustomed to, and that happens. It's natural. It's human tendency. This year, we have to get in the habit of knowing no matter what, we have to have these 5 spots filled so that everything works organically around us and guys have room to operate and do what they need to do." And this is from an article on Milwaukee Bucks on Sports Illustrated, written by Matt Levine earlier today. But I think that's it's a good quote. And of course, Giannis had a couple of quotes that we read through earlier this week. But I like reading into this and seeing what the players think. And here, of course, Chris Middleton kind of shows us what we already knew, but he puts it in his own words. Last year, you had one of the best NBA players of all time, a future Hall of Famer, step into an already solid franchise. And of course, players, they're going to be used to taking on a certain role. And when you have someone who has had a certain role in a different organization and has had a Hall of Fame career within that role, stepping into a new organization that has been very solid and has won a championship in the last 3 years at that point, you're going to have guys, they have habits, and they're going to have to break them. And now I think you're going to start to see if this team can really get unlocked. Age and health becomes a factor when it comes to this Bucks team. But now that these guys have been playing together for a year, you would expect for a lot of those little simple issues that they had last year with just not being used to each other's playing styles, you would hope that goes away and that the full potential of this squad can get unlocked this year. So a really good quote there from Chris Middleton as it just continues to build up the excitement for the upcoming Milwaukee Bucks season. So we'll be back tomorrow on Friday. We'll look into both the Badgers and the Packers football game. It should be both really solid games once again coming up this weekend. Of course, Badgers at Northwestern 11 a.m. on Saturday, and the Packers will be playing at noon at Lambeau, taking on the Houston Texans on Sunday. So we'll dig into those games when we come back tomorrow. My name is Cody Depius. I'm your host, and I want to thank you for being here with us once again today on another episode of A Little Bit of Cheese, your daily bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.